This is Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready. We're about to live in your head rent-free. This is episode 198.
I am Martin.
And I am Robert.
I'm Francis.
I am Marcus.
And I'm Cajun.
Whoa! What was that? That was 2 extra names.
That's right.
2 extra voices, two
extra
names.
voices. As we talked about at the end of last episode, Otterites, we have expanded the Brotherhood of Snakes and Otters officially. They've always been unofficial honorary members, but they are now both officially Snakes and Otters brothers.
The band is now a 5-piece band.
That's right.
And I will note that there's no, what do you call it? Why did it fly right out of my head?
Come on.
Because you're old.
That's
Yes.
right.
There's no, what are they doing fraternities when you join up?
Hazing.
Hazing.
Yes.
That's illegal now.
Yeah, there's absolutely no hazing to join Snakes and Otters.
That's right. The hazing is just the normal ribbing that guys do of one another. So, nothing out of the ordinary.
Of course, the fact goes that we all go back to the college days.
That's true. Snakes and Otters, we've talked about this before, had its genesis at Bellarmine College back in the
That's
mid-'80s.
right. We were all there.
And we were all there, and that's where we all met. As a matter of fact, I wanted to ask you guys, Cajun and Marcus, the Emperor, or Imperator,
Imperator.
I like that.
Yes,
I like that a
Imperator.
lot, yes.
were either, because both of you were at Bellarmine, you guys didn't graduate from Bellarmine. So did either of you have Maggie Mahoney for history? Were you there long enough to have her?
Allegedly, yes.
Oh, that's right. The Imperator wouldn't remember because of his memory issues.
I would have to go back and pull transcripts, actually. I'm familiar so much with the name, whether because of y'all or I actually had her. I think I had a young fellow that was professor in my history class that I had when I was
Could be,
there.
which is a shame. Which is a shame if you did not have
You would
her.
remember if
Well, actually, my mother just brought that up. She was saying that the history teacher that she had said that I never showed up to class.
Oh,
Interesting. I can't
Yeah, I got
imagine how that
routed out.
would be.
no, surely not.
Well, I don't know that would be Maggie then, because she never took roll. She didn't care if you showed up.
Well, that's right. Yeah, I mean, when you reach a certain level,
was
you're
on your-
supposed to be, it's on you, baby.
yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, the reason I bring up Maggie is because she is actually one of the inspirations for today's episode. First of all, we are at Studio F.
Yes, yes.
Here in Johnny's game room.
That's right.
Just down the hall from the entrance to the negative zone where a nihilist does his business.
That's right.
Right. We're staying out of Reed's lab. You don't know
That's right.
what kind of shit's going on in there.
That's right.
So, and again, we are using the new equipment, hopefully with that professional sounding quality that we have sorely lacked. Thanks to the Imperator's research and bringing up of his own equipment, we now have his plus the official Snakes and Otters board, which we are currently using.
Yes, Robert's posted up at the Tascam 4 mix board. We got 5 mics rolled into it. We are rocking and rolling.
We are.
we are the Ayatollahs of rock and rollers,
This
boys.
is some high-end shit, boys.
It is. So the episode today is, this is the second Friday of the month, so we are going to be doing a history. We don't always do history, but, being the guys that we are, we love history, and so much
it comes
of
back a lot, yeah.
Yeah, we'll probably end up doing history, people you should know, or our heroes, depending on the episode. Cajun was telling me at the picnic a couple weekends, weekend before,
Yes,
whenever,
last weekend.
that he misses some of the pop culture episodes since we've gone to the shorter format. So we need to work that in a little bit
because
more.
Our pop culture episodes were more history of pop culture.
They were,
Because
not always, but
we
yeah.
weren't doing,
They were
Taylor
lighter,
Swift.
too, though. They had a lighter
Yes,
feel.
they were lighter.
And,
Yes.
That's right, yeah.
and it's more enjoyable for some people to listen to the lighter ones. Not everybody wants to go in deep on it.
Mrs. Martin agrees with you. That were some of the ones that she liked as well.
Okay, so we will definitely try to work those back into the rotation.
Yeah, I think a couple of those are back on the Trello now.
Good. So this is I titled this because this is my episode. As we talked about in show prep, you've heard Martin and Francis many times talking about how the boys are indulging me and we're doing this episode. Well, nobody's indulging me. I just flat out said, no, we're doing this episode. You must respect my authority.
That's right. Sit the hell down.
Now, you was indulged today. You had breakfast fixed for you.
That's true. That's true. And that was a mighty fine breakfast.
Indeed.
We
It
are,
was
Mighty
good.
fine
we are
breakfast.
full of Jake's sausage.
That's right. Yeah, we had to
Jake's
give a shout
sausage,
out to
yes.
the great Jake Sausage, made in Bardstown, Kentucky, handmade out there on the at the 150 Quick Stop. So, and they're not paying us anything, but they always could.
They always could, yes.
Yes, the Holy Land.
The
That's
Holy
right.
Land.
Yeah, the Holy Lands. That's right.
Nelson County is known officially as the Holy Land.
That's right.
Here at Snakes
That's
and
right.
Otters.
So the episode I call "The History of Europe is the History of the Hapsburgs," or the Hapsburgs is the history of Europe, however you want to put it, because the Hapsburgs were the ruling family of the Holy Roman Empire for centuries. Literally, the
1440 until Francis dissolved it in 1806.
exactly.
Napoleon, don't make me Bonaparte, please. No,
No, I mean-
Napoleon, yes.
Yeah, there was like a 25-year interregnum where the Wittelsbach family had it, but other than that,
Yes, who had it prior?
Yeah,
Because the Holy
14
Roman Empire, from 800 to 1806, it's a 1,000-year empire.
Well, for those who may not realize it, that is the First Reich, is what it is called.
Yes.
I mean, when we
Yes.
talk about Third Reich, everybody knows what that is, but most people do not understand what's first and what's second. And the Holy Roman Empire, in that 1,000 years, that's where Hitler got the thing. You know, got the, a 1,000-year Reich.
Return to that glory.
There was you return to the glory. There was a precedent for that.
Right. It's horrible that he would take that and make it his own. Unfortunately.
That's right. Yeah, because there is much glory and much, and we here in America anyway don't know that history. We really don't.
No.
It's
Well, and
too far east, I think.
Yeah, and that's why I've really been wanting to do this episode, because we've done a lot of European history, we've done a
Yeah.
lot of American history,
Yep.
and one of the things that I find fascinating about the Holy Roman Empire is not just its Catholicity.
Yeah,
because
that's true.
the-
That's right. And then from the beginning, that's
From
correct.
the very beginning, yeah. Well, and obviously from 800, there was nothing else.
That's right. That's Charlemagne.
Charlemagne, Charles the Great.
Who had the great sense of being there when the double digits ran over, so that way we can easily remember 800
Oh,
as
yes,
opposed to
yes,
798 or 803. No.
Yeah, so he actually took power prior to 800.
Yeah, but
but he was crowned in 800.
Exactly. So that's the one. That's kind of like the stake in the ground that we all kind of
Right.
remember. And to be honest, it changed everything, as we'll
It did.
discuss.
It did. So I want to set the stage with this because, again, as you guys know, I like to set everything in its context. Context is incredibly important. We're talking about the Middle Ages. I don't like calling them the Dark Ages because there was very little time that was truly dark in the way we think of it. By the time you get to the Holy Roman Empire, things had really settled back.
This is what they call the High Middle Ages.
I would call it the from here
beginning
on
of-
would be the High Middle Ages.
Right, and that's kind of the
that's probably a little earlier than most historians
it's
would.
not unheard of as a demarcation point.
Right.
And if you, in the Dark Ages, to me, and we've talked about this many times, prior to this, you could possibly make an argument. Post this, no, not really.
No. Basically, when the great monastic orders really start picking up, which is around this time,
Right.
that's when the Dark Ages really ended, because that's when they start really preserving and continuing knowledge and education. Now, granted, it's mostly for those who are in the church.
Right.
That's where we get clerics from, clerks, and that's partially because when you're a dirt farmer, basically all you're doing is growing food for you and your lord.
Yeah, and the
Or your
lords lords are only interested in many respects warfare.
Well, that's one of the things I want to talk about.
Right.
So, again, setting the stage. Once Charlemagne has united Europe, mostly, under his rule.
effectively Central Europe and Italy.
Right, right.
Right. Up north towards Saxony, he does incorporate Saxony at one point, but not much. You're not talking about Dane lands. That's
Maybe not yet,
No,
but they do get
I mean,
incorporated into
you're-
the empire.
Yeah, I mean, you're going east into what would become Poland,
right.
Czech
Oh yeah.
Republic, all of that stuff, Moravia.
Yeah.
Which is
Bohemia.
highly Christian at this point,
Yeah.
or
Yes.
it becomes that. Whereas the pagans are still up north in the further hinterlands.
So, one of the things that we have to remember as Americans, because this is not something that is just, we don't think of it unless you're nerds like us.
Not taught in school.
Well, no, that's not the part that I mean. When you think about the culture and the way things are set up, there are thousands of little petty rulers all across Europe. Basically, if you've got a castle, you rule the area within at least a few miles of your castle.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes you rule quite a bit more. And eventually, all of these little princedoms and kingdoms and principalities and bishoprics, these are all things that come under the sway of the Holy Roman Emperor. And these create the empire. And what's interesting to note is that these rulers are not deposed, right? They are ruling in the name of the emperor, right?
Right.
That's important to remember because it sets the stage for how the empire is ruled and how the emperors are selected. Generally speaking, you get raised to the emperor. Your family remains in the leadership position until you die out, basically. That's not always true, but as a general rule, and that's certainly true with the Hapsburgs. And in order to keep that position, to be elected, because it's an elected position, you always had to continually give stuff away, make promises. It's very much like our modern political system. In order to get elected, you got to make a lot of promises. And generally, you had to keep them. But that autonomy throughout all of the empire was important because that's basically the biggest promise that they had to keep. I'm not going to dick around in your affairs.
Right.
Overly too much. I mean, you still got to pay your imperial taxes and all that kind of stuff.
Still do what I say.
Right. But it's a light hand generally.
Yeah, because they don't say, I'm not going to authoritarianly punish you or exert my authority. In many respects, it's patronage.
Yes, in many respects it is. And this is a model that is really replicated in a lot of other kingdoms. England is probably a great example. We don't think about it. When you think about all the duchies and counties,
That's right.
It's essentially a similar thing.
Yeah. Well, Louis XIV was famous for taking this to the next level with his palace at Versailles. He brought them all in and kept the nobles there because everything came from him. This put them all in the same space so they couldn't run mischief in their own territories.
Yes, that was a brilliant move on his part.
It was, exactly, and which we've talked about in our Louis episode. And Louis is later, but he influences a lot of he and the Habsburgs were mortal enemies.
Yes, and we can certainly talk about that.
But doesn't
we'll get there.
that change, though, considering where Marie Antoinette came from?
Well,
Came
that
from
does
the
change.
Habsburgs, right?
That's right.
Yes, the Hapsburgs, that was one of the other things that Martin was absolutely adamant that we talk about was the inbreeding. And that's an outgrowth of how they grew and maintained their power.
Right. They expanded their domains by strategic marriage alliances, which
Just as much as by warfare, if not more so.
right.
And
More
that,
so.
that is of course eventually it peters out. You can't continue that, or you get idiots like the final king of Spain, who literally was almost I use the word idiot as a
No, I mean he was
disparagingly.
He was handicapped. Basically.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a better word.
And the famous Habsburg jawline.
That's
Could
right.
catch
Well, yes.
rain and fill with water.
Well, the jaw, the nose. I mean, by the end,
Right.
They were some ugly people,
well, yes, they very much could.
At the end,
especially the handsome.
there's an irony for you. That's
Yes.
exactly right.
So
He was better than the others.
yes.
Oh God.
Yeah, it's a low bar, gentlemen.
That's
It's a low bar. So the family themselves are actually from Switzerland, what becomes Switzerland.
Yeah.
And the first Habsburg, generally we think of as a Habsburg, we find in history around 1020. And they take the name from the castle that is built, at least historians think. Records are very spotty, obviously.
Yeah.
And the Habsburg Castle still exists, although it's not in family hands anymore. And eventually they start gobbling up territories around them. And they get involved in court politics. And that's how they get known to the rest of the Holy Roman Empire. And Rudolph I is crowned King of Germany. Now, this was a title that was commensurate with the empire. You only are Holy Roman Emperor if you go and have the Pope lay his hands on you.
Right.
But essentially, it's the same position. So that's 1273. So even before 1440, they had been in authority.
Yeah, this is during the height of the Crusades too. This is
Yeah,
right,
1273. So this is
right around that time is when that fever had overtaken You love context.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then not long after, they overtake the Duchy of Austria and they move the seat of power, their seat of power, there.
Yes.
Probably because they wanted to get out of the mountains, is what I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, Vienna becomes their seat of power.
Yes.
For again that whole 400 years.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's up until 1918.
Yes.
So we're talking almost 700 years. They are 850 years, give or take a little.
Yeah, that's true because
Because
that's-
they are the rulers of Austria literally until the end of World War I. And so they go back and forth as far as who's ruling the empire early on. The Wittelsbachs, as you mentioned, who had the Ignoregnum, they were rulers prior to the Hapsburgs taking it over permanently. There are a couple of other families. Eventually, in 1440, they do consolidate power. And that's...
And the weird thing is, you would think of it being hereditary is how they hold on to it, but at the same time, it's not because again there are these electors, they call them,
Right.
these 7 electors of these German kingdoms, who have to like approve.
Yeah, this is
It's so
unheard
odd.
of for us because we think of it as complete authoritarianism and primogeniture. First son inherits, and if you get a good one, great. If you're not, screw you. You're too bad. And which is how the English throne usually
But
transmitted.
It's like
and the French too.
If King Charles had to like have an affirming vote from 7 members of
From
the House of Lords or something,
basically,
it's
yeah.
so
Well,
unusual.
Well, he would have never gotten it.
yeah, he never would have gotten
Well,
it.
that's right. Yeah.
But with the Habsburgs, they wielded probably one of the reasons they got the leadership of the empire was because they were the biggest, baddest of the potential candidates. When you look at their holdings, they were easily the largest of
Yeah, and
anybody
again,
else.
using the marriage alliances to
And increased
expand
it,
their
yes.
influence and increase their numbers.
Yes. And so through
But yes, it did eventually make for a very shallow gene pool.
very shallow. As a matter of fact, I was reading last night
I've stepped in deeper puddles.
one of the in the bathtub. One of the last of the Habsburgs, the genetic profile was basically as if his parents were brother and sister,
Brother and sister, yeah.
even though it was not. That's just how bad the gene pool had gotten because they kept because there's the
Family tree didn't branch.
not very
The
often,
family bush, so to speak.
so to speak.
The family,
Well, brothers
family
got
phone
away
pole.
with the
Family
Spanish.
weed,
Imperator.
perhaps.
But when you look at the history of the ruling class in Europe as a whole, they're all related.
They
yeah,
are.
this was not unique to them by any means, and
No.
that's kind of one of the reasons the whole damn thing eventually peters out. Victoria is the easy, not your wife, but of course the queen. That was
Of
really,
England, because still could have referenced his wife.
Yeah.
I suppose so, but she was. She became the mother of all the crowned heads,
Yes.
or grandmother, or ancestor of all that. And this periodically happens where you have this new influx of a particular strain.
Right.
And Albert was the same. But of course, eventually, it all kind of circles back around. And
Right.
That it
And
does.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, that it does.
Yes, and the Habsburgs were the masters of this. They generally it was they married off the daughters to other ruling families, and they kept doing this basically to the point of, oh, I see you no longer have any sons. Well, my daughter there will now take over, and well, we're just going to combine those lands into mine, and
Yeah.
they're now all Habsburgs land.
that's one of the advantages of having so many small principalities and rulers. You got plenty of folks to choose from.
You do.
And that, of course,
do.
eventually, as you say, it gets absorbed and fewer, and sooner or later they run out of this stuff.
Well, that's when the inbreeding started to get so bad because they wasn't sending anybody else out to marry in because they had everything. So then they started just keeping it more
Anything that was worth
in-house,
having,
shall we
yeah.
say.
Yeah. Well, and it became a requirement that you had to marry into royal lines, not just
Not just noble, but royal. Absolutely.
Royal
It's
line.
a distinct
So
difference.
I meant to start the show with this. So just one observation. This family, you want to talk about Game of Thrones? This family not only invented it, they mastered it, and blows away everybody else that ever played it. Targaryens, nothing. The Habsburgs are the ones who truly played the game better than anybody else.
And I'm betting George R. R. Martin probably knows that.
I'm sure he
I bet
does.
I bet
He
studied
did. Most now, of course, Game of Thrones is mostly based on the Wars of the Roses on that particular aspect, and there was some of that because it was a little bit more compressed. But you're exactly right. The House of York and the House of Lancaster learned how to do that sort of shit from the Hapsburgs that's going on the continent.
Right.
Well, some of them are very bloodthirsty on killing animals and animals and animals. If it moved, a few of them just love to kill.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. Hunting was, I mean, what else you got to do sometimes, you know.
One of them,
You're either
30,000 antler racks throughout the castle.
Yes,
You could barely
yes.
move.
Yeah,
without
more
getting
so
killed.
because they had more space, more land. The kings of England were known for hunting and stuff, but nothing like these folks.
Right. Well, the current head of the family, Otto, he is the caretaker of the legacy, and he actually runs. It's not exactly a museum or an inn, but he's the caretaker of one of the palaces.
Yeah.
And it's one of these hunting lodges, but
Right.
we would still call it a palace. And that's where all of those, which I forget. You talked about the antlers.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, and I
Prince
think that's-
Ferdinand. You know,
Yes.
the one that sparks World War One. Yeah, I mean that's all he did was shoot stuff.
Right.
Kanapisht is his castle name, and I believe that's the one that's still open.
Yes.
That you can tour. But yeah, I mean that's
Yeah, if it moved, he wanted to kill it.
yeah.
That's what it boiled down to.
Yeah.
And he viewed all the game on his lands as
It's
his.
his. Yes, that was very much a royal prerogative.
And- and
It was common to
Straight on there looking for food. He, go get rid of that peasant, kind of deal.
Yes, and bring me that deer you shot. I'm hungry. Yes. So that's it's very high level kind of a thing about the family. They held Europe together in a time when probably, I don't want to say nobody else could have done it, because maybe they could have, but they certainly did do it. They held Europe together as a polity that was somewhat unified. Certainly, religion had a great deal to do with that. Unfortunately, when the wars of religion started on the continent, that's when things started to fall apart. Northern Germany, or the Germanies, because it wasn't Germany yet, obviously went over to Protestantism and various other entities. Matter of fact, Switzerland is our Calvinists, and that's where they come from. So they didn't even manage to keep the faith there, but that was a great deal of how they ruled.
Yeah, whereas
Was
Bavaria,
faith.
which was one of the larger regions,
Yes.
it stayed fully Catholic, and hence
And
the wars-
Swabia.
That's right, and
Theirs.
there's many others areas that, and this is really where that's one of the reasons we get such a bee in our bonnet, I think, sometimes when we start talking about the Protestant Reformation, especially. Yeah, and especially, and if you remember the TV series The Tudors, they show a Protestant burned by Thomas More, who's my guy, and I had somebody kind of confront me on that. I said, well, yes, that did happen, and yes, the individual they showed on the TV was fictional, but there were moments this happened, 6 in fact, but you have to understand that at the time, it's all about context, that these folks, whatever side you're talking about, it was all us versus them. The other side, no matter Catholic versus Protestant, there's plenty of it to go around, would have a tendency to kill, burn, and revolt in bloody fashion.
Right. Well,
And
because-
England being an island Henry at the time was very concerned, it ain't getting here, folks. And if it does, it's getting stomped out.
Irony of ironies, yes.
That's right, because ultimately when it did come, he says, we're doing it my way.
Well, and the reason for that is that it was always seen as an attack against the state.
Correct, because
Yes.
church and state are
That's-
unified at this point, and we Americans do not get that.
No.
Yeah,
Really do not.
a religious dissent is the same as a political dissent.
That's right, and it's good government must react, and it must react, especially, dare I say
They're a
it,
traitor.
we're going to go medieval on their asses.
But in this day and age, that is happening in the U.S. Any dissent from the government line has to be stomped out.
Yes, not physically, bloodily though. It's
Sometimes that too.
Well-
it happens some. That's correct, but that's always squashed under the law.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in recent years, it's happened that way. Look
Yeah.
out west with land management and so forth, and BLM came in on some ranchers out there saying, no, that's not what we want. And the ranchers were in their legal rights doing what they were doing.
The TV series Yellowstone covers that a lot, about how the differences between urban money versus rural land, that's still revolutionary today. It's inflammatory.
Right. And you know, to be fair, the difference is important, though, is that we're talking, one is religious excuses, for lack of a better word, versus other reasons, a multitude of other reasons. But either way, you know, it was seen as an attack against the state specifically. The BLM thing, you make an argument that was less a attack against, because obviously the BLM's not attacking the state specifically, but you know, it's, at least in not that case, they were doing stuff on the ranchers' lands, right? Because I'm trying to remember the details.
Well, no, it had to do with ranchers and water rights and
Water rights,
various
yes.
other things. And the federal government basically came in because the state was not necessarily opposite the ranchers out that way either. You see, when you get further out west, it's the Secretary of the Interior that has all the power, even more so than the President of the United States, because of
Controlling
some odd
resources.
circumstances of the way the laws are made up out that way.
Yeah.
But that's a totally other thing we can get into.
Yeah, that's a fodder for another episode, most definitely.
Well, we're famous for rabbit holes, guys. You
Yes.
know that. It's okay.
So, by the time you get to into the 1600s, because this is a period that we have talked about many times.
Yes.
You know, the Hapsburgs are taking the lead in fighting the 30 Years' War, and that's where the King of Sweden comes down and pokes his nose into European continental. 'Cause he's still part
And
of
he
Europe.
was the badass of the badasses.
He was. Unfortunately, he was dumb enough to get himself killed at Breitenbach.
Yes.
And, you know, because supposedly he was a very good king.
Sweden had an enormous military tradition. They were the strongman militarily of entire Europe. We don't think of it that way. We're very France and England and maybe Germany. World War I and II kind of focuses the way that we think of Europe. We think of, oh, they're just the Swedes with the pretty blonde ladies. No, these guys were serious.
They were.
badasses.
They wielded power all out of proportion to their population, though. And that's because they were professionals at it.
Well, that's right, and that's one
And
of the things
that's
that.
what defined the difference between them and a lot of the ones that they fought.
Well, they taught that the need for professionalism to all their foes.
Yes.
And in 3 generations, you have Britain with the largest military on earth, and in France and Russia right behind it, because they all got their butts kicked, with the exception of the Brits at Blenheim, but almost. That's where things.
Well, the Swedes didn't win every battle.
No, that's true. That's true. Well,
Yes.
I mean, Peter the Great did kick their ass eventually.
Yes, that was much later in history, though. So the religion is one of the things that defines the Habsburgs, and
Yes.
it is one of the things because they remained staunchly Catholic, other than one or two of the cadet lines that were in other parts of Europe. The cadet lines in the Netherlands, I think, are the ones that ultimately went Protestant. I'd have to go back to my notes. But the main branch that is ruling the empire is pretty much always Catholic. And that
Irony of
defines
ironies,
them.
so did France. France stayed completely Catholic.
Yes.
His most Catholic majesty was how the French kings were taught to be.
Yes.
And of the big ones, England is the one that goes Protestant.
Right, which, imagine the difference in history if Henry had stayed Catholic.
Oh, we've done that one a whole lot. That's
Well,
exactly
we've
right.
talked about it. We've never actually done a what if on it.
That might be a really good one to
It might
to
be
do.
one day,
yeah.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
So, they're very instrumental, though, in setting up that Peace of Westphalia, which we've talked about in the
Yes,
treaties.
that's right.
And it defines how religion is handled throughout the empire. Because basically, and they follow this, even though they are staunchly Catholic, for the most part. I mean, there's always issues. If you want to be Protestant, Lutheran, Calvin, whatever, then that's fine, but there's still a state religion. And that's true in all of the various principalities in the empire.
Right.
And obviously that tolerance does not work perfectly.
No, Louis
But-
was. I mean, but the zeitgeist of the time. There's a
Sorry.
Push the button, man.
Word boner.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. That is very important to understand that tolerance really is kind of the way of the future that they're trying to embrace. And
Yes.
unfortunately, as with so many things, it does not hold eventually.
Right, because, and I think it's the difference between the Habsburgs. And when I say the Habsburgs, I'm really just talking about the Holy Roman Empire
Yeah.
at this point, and all of the other monarchs. All of the other monarchs are purely hereditary, and it is divine right, absolute rule. The Habsburgs are not. They are elected. They are beholden to those that vote for them, and that's why the horse trading and the political favors. This was part of the political favors and horse trading. All right, fine. You want to be Protestant? I'll leave you alone, but you damn well better pay your taxes and bow to me as your emperor.
Yeah.
And
Which is a feudal holdover of mindset.
no, honestly, I think it's not entirely. There is some aspect because there's some aspect of that, but that's true of any monarchy. That
Right,
you
yeah.
must bow down to me.
That's right. The overlord idea of overlord is a thing.
But it's
Fealty piece.
Right.
the fealty. Yeah, that's the part that is important. But the interesting thing, though, is that somewhat autonomous nature of letting the little principalities have some authority over their local people, and that is an entirely different thing than any other monarchy in the period.
They don't believe in absolutism then.
Well,
They do.
No, I think Maximilian especially,
Yeah.
especially the second.
I mean, they aimed for the same absolutism, while at the same time understanding.
That's
that-
why the marriages were so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, okay, I still got to keep these electors happy, because again, it's this weird. We're hereditary absolutists that get confirmed by an election. It's
Right.
so odd.
It is, but it's, I think, also recognizing the political realities, because otherwise, in a continent the size of Europe, what you're going to end up with is, war, constant, never-ending war, and that's the brilliance. Is they horse traded a lot of the rights that maybe, whether it be through marriage, through whatever,
Treaties.
in some cases they just bought.
Yeah.
They bought out some of their
Yeah, once you reach a certain level, you've got the capacity and capital to do that.
right. So
The concept of capital is not really something they would even think about.
not the way we think of it today. So they almost ruled in a very modern way during that 400 years.
Is
that
it
they were-
fair to say we stole some stuff from them? Not necessarily Americans, but modern understanding of government, good government.
Probably.
See, because that's kind of what I'm sensing is kind of one of our themes here is good government is exactly what everything is always supposed to be about.
I don't know that we necessarily stole it in the sense of
Adapted.
we looked at them as a model,
Yeah.
so much as they were just the precursors to a pragmatic way of doing business.
Because it worked.
Because it worked.
Yeah.
And if you have a successful political system that has any input by someone other than the king or the ruler, the dictator, the Führer, whoever that may be, you're going to have this kind of horse trading.
But it swung back and forth quite a few times.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Depending, they were masters of reading the political situation to where, so you get to 1848, and it's no longer the Holy Roman Empire, but the family they declared themselves the Emperor of Austria.
Right.
You know, and you get those.
And actually, that was done prior to the dissolution of the empire.
Yes, that's 1804. Francis II
Yes.
declares himself Francis I of the Austrian Empire. Then in 1806, dissolves the Holy Roman.
He saw the
Empire.
writing on the wall with Napoleon.
Right.
Yes.
So, but by the time you get to those revolutions of 1848 that are burning across Europe, they're like, well, you know what? The old man doesn't have the best reputation here, so we'll abdicate, turn it over to the younger guy who maybe is a little more appealing. We'll grant a few concessions, but then as soon as he's settled, he took all the concessions back.
Right.
And they went completely absolutist then in the 1860s.
Right, which is ultimately part of what
Right, and
leads to the downfall.
Right, and it becomes, the model for Europe then is to be reactionary, pull back on anything you granted in 1848 and 1849.
I think that was inevitable. I don't think you can lay that at the feet of the Habsburgs, though.
Yeah, it was
Because I think that was an inevitable.
Yeah,
It was so embedded it took a war to change it.
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean,
wars, actually.
Cajun, you're awful. You look like you're starting to say something every once in a while, and I just want to make sure we're not leaving you out, because you and
Oh, no, I'll pop in, but sometimes some things I think of you move on and cover it anyway, so, you know.
It's, you guys got to remember, even though we are the three original, we are all equal.
That's correct.
Hey, you ever remember me being shy?
No.
Okay.
No, just
Point said.
And you ever remember me being equal?
unequal.
Yes.
Yes, but I think we mean that in different ways. Yes.
That's very good.
Is he talking about our Life of Women previous post?
No, I wasn't.
Careful now, we are a family-oriented show.
See what I tell you?
I didn't
What
say
tell you.
anything in particular.
Francis doesn't let us use that kind of language.
I was talking about playing pinochle or something. How do you know what I was talking
All
about?
right, that's good. That's good.
I don't think
don't be
Marcus
afraid.
ever played
Innuendo
strip
is one,
poker,
of,
maybe.
is one of the best ways of writing or putting things out there. You just stop short of actually saying it and let everybody think it.
Yes.
Oh, being the new guy, though, isn't it about time we're getting to the bourbon break or so?
I was just about to say that, as a matter of fact, because I just saw that we are at minute 35. So that is a good point to stop and do what we like to call the bourbon break.
You did that very well, sir.
Excellent.
Yes,
Excellent,
that's
sir.
right. Of course, yeah.
So, new guys. We'll let the new gentleman start. Now, granted, Marcus is not drinking. He does not drink, given that he has had the liver issues.
Well, liver transplants.
Wow. Yes. Which we have talked about. We have
Yeah.
kept our listeners apprised of your progress over the last couple of years. So they're well aware of the.
Yeah, I'm running on spare parts from other people.
Yes. Well, you get to a certain age, that's almost inevitable. Yours are just a little bit more drastic.
Well, I am too. I mean, I've got caramelized bone in my neck from where they fused it back together from a dead person, So if I go around saying I see dead people, you know why.
Very good.
There you go.
Very
There
good.
you go.
I like that.
So, Cajun, what are you drinking?
Monks Road, 5th District today, which is in my backyard.
That's right.
Literally, my property conjoins to the distillery property, and I have plenty of bourbon seeds planted and sprouting, and will become their bourbon in about 6 years.
I love that term, bourbon seeds. That is awesome. That is just awesome. Yes.
So I guess I ought to give a little intro on myself since I've never
Yes,
been here before.
yes.
This is a good time for it. As I said, I have bourbon seeds planted, grew up farming, still got the farm, last of the line. Been to college, country boy to the city, and met these, well, I better say fine gentlemen and just leave it at that.
Here's your $20.
Always like country boy is so right, and you have such a Bocephus vibe, that I was like, man, too bad we can't use that. Hank's probably got that copyrighted, but that's
Well, he used to go by Bocephus. When we had that legend, wait for it, dairy night out
that's
back in college when Francis's rear end was bobbing up and down in my car because he was hanging out the window.
Actually, it was my car you were driving.
That's right. Yes, I was just driving.
Just driving it. That's right.
And I just happen to favor Bocephus in looks, too.
Yes. And with that black hat you were wearing that night, that was just, you were a dead ringer. So, but anyways, yes, country boy made good.
But I did a lot of different things over the years, back to farming, and
he's an outstanding cook. We got to mention.
Yes.
Look, he was manning most of the stove this morning for breakfast at my house. It was I got to do the eggs because he told me to, but he had done all the rest of the stuff beforehand.
And he can smoke some meat. Barbecue.
Yeah.
you're saying I'm very good at handling my meat.
Yes, you are.
Yes.
The lady said back in college, too.
Yeah. Boom, boom.
Skin that smoke.
At least the ones that Mark didn't take from me.
Well, there is
The
that.
emperor there.
Marcus. So, Marcus, even though you've been on the show.
Sadly, I don't remember.
Yes.
That's true.
Yes, as we've mentioned before, Marcus, when the Imperator is reintroduced to women that he's known in the past, the first thing he does is apologizes.
Usually.
Yeah. Just because
It's most likely what he needs to do.
most
Yeah.
likely, yeah.
His reputation precedeth him.
Yes. So, you want to speak a little bit about yourself, even though they're a little familiar
Just
with
leave
you.
it
We
at
always
us.
have new listeners. So.
Grew up in a Catholic family, ironically from the Alsace-Lorraine region, which is one of the Hapsburgs.
Yes.
Off and on. Yeah.
Well, as a matter of fact, the Lorraines are the current male line. It's
Yes.
Hapsburg Lorraine, and that's where the male line comes from.
Yeah,
Not him specifically.
not
but
me specifically. But
You called him the emperor.
yeah. Yeah, my family's been Catholic since the beginning of time.
Since Jesus was little, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
At least since he was 33.
Yeah. And Catholic educated,
Right?
high school, college, where I met these reprobates.
That's a good word. That's a good word.
Reprobates, sorry.
Yeah.
Word boner.
Yeah, very good, very good.
Which I need to concur with that too. Pretty much the same grouping of raised Catholic, family Catholic.
Yeah.
Educated that way and everything too. To
Yes.
get y'all.
Martin and I were the only two that were raised non-Catholic, though I succumbed 20 years ago.
So,
Well, it's the guilt.
The Borg brought you in.
The what?
The Borg.
Yes, the board. Yeah, well,
The resistance was
yeah,
futile.
as I always, yes, the resistance was futile. But I always blame it on my eldest spawn for asking, why doesn't Daddy go to church with us?
Ooh.
And that started the slow slide into papism. Anyways,
Three cradles and a convert.
yes, three cradles and a convert. You are definitely outnumbered, Martin.
That's all right.
Anything else you want to say?
Well, I mean, I've, the age of 31, lost all my memory for the most part.
Historical memory, because obviously you
Historical
didn't lose the
memory.
ability to speak or
No,
anything like that.
No, it actually kept most of my skills. There was a
For
drastic.
which your wife is thankful.
Yes, there was a drastic personality change.
Really, because I don't notice that.
No, I don't either. Not drastic. Nothing that couldn't be written off as just getting older.
Yes.
Well, okay. And then,
See, the fun part of all this is he relies on us to provide the
We
message.
could
I
we could
do.
be lying out our ass. You
yeah,
realize
I
that?
know.
But
Why? The truth is so much better.
Yeah.
Agreed. Why
he
we
can't
don't
make
need
up
to?
anything better than what he's actually lived.
Yeah.
Amen to that.
He was legendary anyway. Why change that?
Exactly.
And then 2 liver transplants and a decade of dying.
Yes.
And
Well, that's why your perspective is so important.
yeah, and now like Cajun, I have a small farm, and am working on it in my advancing years.
And a special shout out for bringing me your Jacoby Sales and Service hat. It's a nice trucker hat with the mesh back. I feel
Yeah.
it's very testosterone-y.
Don't worry, I'll bring you a real green one. You can get rid of that one when I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, green and gold one. Yeah,
Oh
outstanding.
God,
Here comes the rivalry.
I'm an international harvester.
That's true. You've been faithfully that for as long as we've known you. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, gotta love the Harvester Scouts. Those
Well,
are
yeah,
so
because
cool.
they were
Yeah.
built here, weren't they? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
No, the foundry was here, but they
Foundry
didn't. They
was
didn't
here.
assemble the vehicles here.
because that was such a watershed moment in labor here in this town is when International Harvester, a huge employer, went under and it was gone.
Yep.
And their people's grandparents were affected by that. Our folks are.
Yeah.
Are,
Yeah, like
Right,
my uncle
right.
worked at
Believe me, I understand. Being from Michigan, I get
say
that
that's
entirely.
that's
yes.
a big deal. That's right.
Yes.
So, are we moving on to?
Yes,
other-
let's move on
other
to
bourbons?
the other two bourbons.
Yeah, because you're drinking.
I'm also with the Monks Road 5th
I was
District.
going to say you guys
Now-
are drinking the same thing.
Right now, we've had the Monks Road small batch at my place at Studio M before.
Right.
This is the up level 5th District. This is good shit. And again, Log Still Distillery, founded by the Dant family.
That's right. Great Wally Dan.
Yeah, Wally Dant.
I know Wally.
Yeah.
And we've discussed the court case where the Dant family can't really use J.W. Dant because they sold it to Heaven Hill.
Right.
That's right. Well, my grandfather actually worked at the old J.W. Dant distillery back in the 40s.
Yeah.
Well, let's give them a shout here, too, for bringing the amp in place on the distillery property where they're bringing prime musical acts in, both
awesome.
new and old. 38 Special was playing last night and really helping the economy of the area in more ways than just making and selling whiskey. They're actually have improved the tourism industry
Making it a
locally
destination
tremendously.
place. Because other than touring distilleries, what else you got? Well, he's trying to fix that and say, no, we've got more than that.
It's an awesome
With
facility.
several bed and breakfast facilities on the property.
That's right. And we've been down there at the bar.
Yeah. And again, the reason it's called, the Log Still Distillery or Monk's Road is it's literally on the same road as the Gethsemane Monastery.
That's correct. And growing up out there, that's what you called it, out by the Monk's Road. Everybody knew what that was. So there's a history of
where the name
that.
comes from.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the bourbon. Cajun, we went straight into your background. We didn't even talk about how you, what taste you were getting in describing the bourbon. So you guys, since you're both drinking it, do a little comparison.
Yeah, it's super high end, very smooth. Again, I say this a lot about these good bourbons, but I get that little bit of chocolate almost, like a chocolate marshmallow type flavor. It's good.
I'll agree with most of that. I'm picking up a little citrusy to it, too. I'm not sure if it's orange or what, but I think there's a little citrusy in it also. It's nice, smooth. It's more of a wheated-based bourbon. Historically, I'm not big on rice myself, but
Well, that's kind of
personally.
universal for all of us. We're not
Yeah.
a huge rye.
Well, the
folks.
rye really does seem to impact not just the bourbon you're drinking, but the next couple of bourbons you drink.
It hangs around like an X.
It does.
Yeah, that's right. We don't buy much. We've had them. We feature them occasionally, but as a general rule, now that we're kind of getting our feet wet, shall we say, I don't see us buying ryes. I think I see us avoiding them.
Well, it's
Well, we've
the
had
high
some.
rise.
that's
well,
right.
even some of the ones that have a low amount, I think, at least for me, I'm picking that up a lot more than I used to now that I no longer drink soft drinks.
Well, I bought.
Verner's aside.
Yeah, way back, and when we first started this, I bought a bottle of the Basil Hayden rye, and it curled Martin's mustache. He just did not like it.
And it's still not uncurled.
I had somebody gift me one of those, and I gifted it to somebody else that did like rye. It did not stay around long.
It was very different. We did eventually get it consumed. Of course, I gave it to my brother-in-laws, and that's all it took.
Well, that took 5 seconds.
That's right, exactly. So it's something that we can make happen, but I don't see us buying it again.
Rye whiskeys are kind of like the fruit cake of whiskeys.
That is so good.
Oh, awesome.
so
That's
good.
not a word boner itself, but the
Word
phrase
boner.
deserves
Yeah, that's
fruit
right.
cake
Well,
whiskeys.
Here's the thing, though. Historically, though, they had these rye whiskeys early on, and they were cut so much. I mean, if you had 50% whiskey in the bottle, that was considered high end. I mean, it was really watered down to the point where you wasn't getting hit with what they're selling as rye whiskey today at a higher price point.
Yeah, that's
Not even close.
That's right.
Yeah,
because
that's
they
true.
were sold by the barrel in those days.
Yeah, with tobacco juice and dead rats and
That's
everything
exactly-
else in there. I
We've
mean.
talked about that with the bottle and bond issue, which is kind of to fix some of that.
So what are you having there,
Well,
Francis?
now, Robert and I are having the same, and here at my place, we've talked about that we've gone to the Old Forester Whiskey Row series. Is kind of like my thing these days here, and there are 4 of them that we have based on the years. We've hit real hard the 1920 Prohibition style, and we also done the 1870 last time we were here, the Frontier Whiskey style. One of the ones we haven't, and we've done this one here once. We haven't. There's a second one that we'll probably get to next episode. This is the 1897 bottled in bond. This is, and Old Forester basically has taken the recipes for all of what they did at these given times and brought them back in this amazing line extension. Of course, if you know Old Forester, to me it's my favorite, at least today. They have an enormous line extension of different brands. Same brand but different
They're the ones who
expressions.
basically invented the idea of bottled in bond. They were
That's
the ones
exactly
who
right.
advocated for this government intervention to guarantee,
That you're getting
quality and the consistency.
because they recognize that hurts. This is a marketing inspiration long before marketing was even really a thing. It's like our brand is suffering because people are not getting what we're creating. We need to find a way to make that stop. And that's hence the entire concept of bottle and bond. But I'm having it over ice, which has actually since melted. I actually invested in the spheroid ice cubes for all of us today. Of course,
Objects.
Yes, that's right.
It's an oxymoron to call it a spherical cube.
Yes, that's.
Are you saying you're not sharing your? Never mind.
Spherical ice.
He's not sharing his balls?
Okay, I just want to let you hit it. You got it in the show today.
For Lord's
Death
sake.
Star of ice.
No.
So what kind of flavor are you getting?
What kind of flavor are you getting?
100 proof. There is that. The citrus word comes to mind. I would have never been able to articulate it if you hadn't said it first. But as it's seasoned, shall we say, as the ice is melted, it's not as chilled as it was. It is very mild for 100 proof bourbon. This is really
Yes,
really
once the melted water has made the bourbon bloom, when you take it straight, because I always like to take a taste before it melts to get a baseline of what the bourbon is. And it's got a good bite. It's sharp at that point. But yes, it does mellow out quite a bit.
good. Yeah, when you put it with ice, dang, it's good, and it is
Now-
very mellow. I like it.
It is mellow in that sense, but I'm also getting, I don't know if it's just weird stuff going on with my taste buds, but it almost tastes like there's a bit of that peppery flavor that you get with a rye. So I don't know if it has any rye or if it's something else is going on.
I think the mash bill is well over 70% corn, but then I think there's 16 to 18% rye.
I was going to say, 'cause
Okay.
I'm not picking that up.
Does not surprise me.
But you guys know I'm probably the least sensitive palate amongst us.
Got to drop those soft drinks.
Well, I'm working on it.
Working on it. Now, didn't one of you, either Robert or Francis, tell me they were coming out with a 5th bottle in this line of Old Fellow?
Yes, there is another one coming.
Was it you?
Well,
I don't remember.
I know that I've tried to do a little research on that. One thing I have found, there is a 5th, but it's not. It's 1915, which is basically it is a half 1910, half 1920, and they put it together.
So it's blended.
It's blended, exactly. And that's available not well. I've seen the pictures of it. I mean, all of them have a different color ribbon on the top of it, and this was a pink one. But I think it's one of those things that's not highly available yet, because essentially, if you could do it at home, if you put half one, half the other, it's the same thing. But it was there's another one that's coming out, which I wish I could give you the specifics on it, that's done, I think it's like 177, don't quote me on that number, that goes back to from in the last century, which kind of imagine we're actually talking about the 20th century, when they had the distillery fire, they had a particular type that they were using at that time, and that's coming out. But it's not under the Whiskey Row year brand.
I could have sworn that the bottle I saw at the Walmart in Corydon, because in Indiana, Walmarts sell hard liquor inside the stores. We don't see that here. And
That's Kentucky Law Spirits have to be separate.
yes, that's why
the rest of the
Kroger's has
store.
a separate section. Even Sam's has a separate space
They have to have
for
a
that.
separate
yes.
entrance, yeah.
Myers does too. I mean, all the ones that do that. So I could have sworn that I saw an Old Forester that said 1909, but it seems very unlikely there would be a 1909 and a 1910.
Yeah, good question on that. But
Yeah.
We'll have to
It
look
was
that
like a
up.
$50 bottle even at Walmart. Walmart is usually a pretty good sale price.
well,
on it.
I
Whatever it was that I saw.
dropped 4 bills to get 2 bills to get all 4 of these at one time.
They run 52 plus.
That's right. So we're drinking I'm giving you guys the good stuff. God save me.
Yes, if we were still doing 4
So
episodes.
that means I provide the unattainable stuff almost.
You
pretty
have.
much, yeah.
Yes.
That's right. Well, because you
But I grow it.
you gifted me with the Waddy Boons and Son that we had a couple episodes ago, and we'll have again at some point.
Yes.
Which is that's a $90 bottle, folks. That is definitely a.
Which is not the most expensive bourbon you can
It's
buy.
not. No, I mean we're
No, I've got about $2,000 bottle sitting up home.
that's the one we're not allowed to crack. Am I right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't think we can get him drunk enough to offer us that.
No, but
23 pack?
as we said when we were out there, I don't know if we said this on
No,
air.
Weller?
White label Weller.
Oh,
That's the one I never can figure out which one it is, because Weller has so many different ones, and we've not featured them on the show. But when we get to your house, I'm sure we will. But one of the other ones that we did when we were out there, when Robert and I were out there recently, we had some of that Booker's.
That was phenomenal.
Conned you into cracking. And
Yeah,
damn,
it's
it
a
was
single
Booker's-
barrel special that, what was the proof on that? 107,
122, I think.
122. I knew it was way up
That's
there.
right, yeah. And it was just a whim of mine because we're out there and he says, "What do you guys want?" And he's got them all displayed. He's got the largest bourbon collection of all of us along the top in his kitchen above the cabinets, and we're just kind of looking at them. And I said, "Let's try that Booker's because we've never done Booker's."
Right.
And I happen to know
Now we know why, because it's expensive.
it's expensive and it's one of the, but, it's the same.
There is a
That
cheaper
was-
line than that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
It
that-
was
it's
the Booker's is what I always drank.
Yeah, that's because you always go big.
I guess.
But
Yeah.
back in the day, you could buy that bottle of Booker's in the box for $20, $30. I
Yes.
mean,
Yeah.
it
because
was
it
nowhere
came-
near what it is
It
now.
came out at the same time. It's part of that. At least three. There may be four. When they started talking about small batches, Beams was one of the first ones to do that, and they came out with Basil Hayden, Knob Creek, and Booker's, and I think there was another one.
Bakers.
I think, yeah, you're right. I think that's the other one. That was unheard of in the bourbon industry at the time. What are you doing line extensions? Why aren't you just writing, the brands, your Jim Beam brand? And they're thinking, no, we can do better than this. And lo and behold,
And
it changed
worked.
everything.
It worked, yeah.
Yeah.
They created their own specific market, just like
That's
the
exactly-
beers and the diamond
exactly
market
right.
did
And
after
it
World
was
War
highly
II,
successful.
buying up every diamond in the world and saying, hey, y'all need this.
Right.
Yeah,
Booker's is one of those things that set a new precedent in bourbons
it did.
Yes.
with the high alcohol content.
That's right.
And the packaging and the
And the
nice
packaging.
wooden box and everything
Yes.
with the slide up glass straw or plastic window, whatever. you
As a
wanna call
matter
it.
of fact, when I used to drink Booker's, I was sharing it with an old friend who's passed away, Robert
I
Botts.
was going to ask if it was Mr. Botts.
It was Mr. Botts, and Mr. Botts addressed Booker's in this way. He started calling it Big Boy Bourbon.
Really?
That's
Yeah.
If you've ever met the Booker himself, which I did on
Yes.
2 occasions, and he's since passed away. But I happen to have one of my good friends and parishioners has worked with Beams. He's a chemist. He's just recently retired, but he's worked with him like for 50 years. That may not be exactly right, but he would always tell me about Booker. And Booker was a, shall we say, big boy.
Yes.
He was larger than life in all ways.
In all ways, that is correct. And his son Fred, who I did meet many, many times back when I worked in Bardstown, nice fella. He's the master distiller today. And
Yes.
Fred's a big boy, too. I mean, it's just, genes are what they are. But these guys know bourbon.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
Booker was
talking-
famous for coming in and just saying, nope, that's not right. Not this, it's got to be this way.
Well, Leon Greenwell, Sonny Greenwell's dad, worked down there at the Booker plant for years and years
I
and years.
did not know that. No, that's the one in Boston, right?
Right.
That's what I thought. Yeah, 'cause
Right.
that's where it was. That's where most of the stuff happens.
I love the Tales of the Holy Land.
Yes.
We're talking about Booker No, N-O-E,
Yes.
that's their last name, Booker and Fred. Again, that's the Beam.
That's the Beam family, essentially.
Family
And
line.
ended up at the local funeral director in New Haven, basically. That's what Sonny Greenwell
That's
place.
right, yeah, and who was best friends with one of my mother's brothers. I mean, it's a small community, folks.
I mean, it's a small world when you're Catholic, but then you go down to the Holy Land, it's even smaller.
I mean, they lived above the funeral home. I spent many a night above a dead body there on the weekends.
Well, that's true because one of Sonny's sons was good buddy.
Same
of
grade,
yours. Same
yes.
grade. That's right. So
Okay,
And
so
are you past the, what is it called? Prosecution? You're past prosecution?
statute of
on- Statute of limitations.
Yeah, that'd be past statute of limitations
Okay.
on anything that
On
happened.
the necrophilia, yes.
That's right. That's right.
well,
So-
that's good because
so-
I'd hate to see us rated over that.
Yeah.
I sense Robert wants to move on.
Well, we've been doing bourbon break now for about 20 minutes, so we should probably.
well, and this is
yeah.
going to be one
Kind
of
of
those.
introduction, too, for us new people.
This is
Right,
gonna be,
right.
Yeah, we're going to learn a
Well-
lot in the next few episodes because we've never done this as a with a 5-piece band before. So yeah.
Well, our bourbon breaks have often gone 20 to 30 minutes, so
Yeah,
it's
that's right.
not unusual.
But you still had a couple of shout-outs you wanted to do very
Yes,
quickly,
yes,
right?
we need to do some shout outs. So, as you know, Otterites, we like to call attention to notable passings.
Yes.
And the one that I especially, I'd already planned on doing this. Martin made sure to remind me. He already knew that this was coming up. The great John Romita
Senior.
passed away. Senior passed away at the age of 93 in his sleep. So he went one of the best ways you can possibly
Amen.
go.
Yep.
Probably number 2 on the list, yeah.
Well, the Imperator is of two minds on this, actually. because he says that's how he wants to go, that other way, in the middle of
Any good way?
mad, passionate sex. But then I also distinctly remember him saying after the incident that
It happened.
where he discovered that, yes, he does have liver issues. It was in the middle of an encounter with his wife.
Coitus.
And yes,
There is a story.
there's always a
No, no.
story.
I was at the hospital, laying in a bed after I'd bled to death a couple of
Microphone.
times. Sorry. After I'd bled to death. And in the room, I had 5 women were in the room at the time. And
So far, this doesn't really sound like any story I've not heard.
well, no, the
heard the
doctor
Were
was
they clothed?
asking
Yeah.
what was happening when I started bleeding to death. What were you doing? And I just pointed over in the general direction over there and said, her.
To his dear wife, yes.
So then the doctor turns around, looks, and all of these women that are standing there all of a sudden get a kind of bright-eyed look in their face and just all of them point at my wife at the same time.
Just to be absolutely
Just to be
clear.
certain.
Yes.
At least he didn't say them by mistake.
Yes.
Well, yes. Yes, occasionally the emperor has been known to utter a faux pas. This is one he probably won't remember, but it's a good one. He and Mrs. Emperor were
The
walking.
Empress?
Yes, the Empress were walking past the spaghetti factory one day, and he says to her, "Oh, we've had dinner there." And her response was, "No, we haven't."
Oops.
Yes, that's pretty much how that went. It was someone else he was remembering. This is early on in the relationship.
Yeah, this was before I lost my memory.
Yeah.
Oh, so you had no excuse. Yeah, too
No.
bad.
I had a similar episode with Guardians of the Galaxy 2 that I went to see with somebody. It's like, we saw the first one. No, we didn't.
Yeah.
I don't know who it was with, but it wasn't me.
Yeah, so that could be bad, yeah. Anyway, so the great John Romita, noted mostly nowadays for his work on Spider-Man. He took over from the great Steve Ditko and was on the book for quite some time, off and on after a little while, because Gil Kane took over probably 2 or 3 years later, because I know it was in the 80s when he was issue number, but Romita had done others after that. So
Well, Romita got kicked upstairs essentially to art director for the whole of Marvel.
he did. He
And
also did some Fantastic Four right after Kirby.
He did. That's correct. And Romita was one of those guys like John Buscema and Sal Buscema especially that could always come, slide right in, knock the bad boy out, still make the deadline, and move on.
Yes.
But he became the house look for Spider-Man for decades. Until recently. Anytime you bought merchandise, swag that had Spider-Man on it, you're seeing Romita's look. And he's the one that defined what most of the generations that in the 70s and 80s and beyond think of as Spider-Man.
Probably kind of all the way until McFarlane took over the book.
Well, he still dominated after that in the merchandise area. But you're right, McFarlane designed it differently. He was one of the first few people that was given the authority to do that. And
It's less so much a design differently as McFarlane was just a drastically different style.
yeah, it's
The
stylistic.
biggest
is the right word, yeah.
difference was how he did the webs.
Right, yeah, and that was
They were all over the place.
right, which was that was his mark on it. But Romita was the one that bulked up Spider-Man from the scrawny kid that Ditko had envisioned and mostly delivered. Although, as we talked about in the show prep, he allowed Spider-Man in particular, rarely Peter Parker, to show himself as
Yes,
being.
there was always a difference between the two.
Yeah.
Peter Parker always looked like a normal person.
Right.
But Spider-Man, eventually he did bulk up.
Right, exactly, and that was Romita, and he was the one that shepherded through so much of it because he's the one that created the look for Mary Jane. I mean, Mary Jane was brought in. Give the quote because I butchered it before.
Face it, Tiger. You just hit the jackpot.
That's right. That's the very introduction of Mary Jane that has become known so well in comic book lore. That's Romita. He designed that look. He created her look and brought her in. Gwen Stacy. If you look in some of the retrospectives that have been coming out since Romita's death, they show some of the things that he would experiment with her on. Having her dance, which is something they don't usually give space for in the comics. It was one of those quintessential moments that lays out just exactly how artistic minded. He's like Kirby. He knows how to story tell
Yes.
with images. And it's just, he was the last of the great giants. I don't know, there's very few left. From that, because he was Golden Age.
Last of the Golden Age into the Silver Age.
Yeah,
Yes.
because he did have a history of doing some of the romance stuff and other stuff with the Timely comics in the late 40s and with Atlas in the 50s, and he's brought in by Stan Lee in the 60s. Pretty much, he starts with Daredevil. Because they didn't have a regular Daredevil artist. Bill Everett comes in, does one issue, then they kind of bounce around a little bit. They give Romita the book for a while, but that's when Ditko leaves. Spider-Man, they say, well, okay, you can do this. There you go.
It's interesting to
History
note
was made.
that Romita and Buscema, to a degree, John Buscema, the elder of the two brothers, neither one liked working in the Marvel method, which is where they basically had to figure out what the story was going to be on their own.
Right.
They got some direction from Stan, and probably as they worked with other
Or
writers.
Roy
later.
Thomas especially.
Or Roy.
Because Buscema and he, like Conan the Barbarian's just like the obvious one. They were
Well, I imagine that Roy was better about providing more detailed plots than Stan was. Stan was, especially with Kirby, hey, let's do a story where the Fantastic Four are going to fight God. That was Galactus.
yeah.
And that was all that it was. And sometimes there wouldn't even be that. And oddly enough, Lee used to talk about that. I never know what the guys are going to bring into me each month to script.
Right, yeah, because he would concept, the guys would create, then he would script. So it was not just a top level only.
Sometimes it wasn't even concept. There was no discussion. Like with Ditko at the end, Ditko did everything. The only thing he did not do was the final word balloons.
Right.
Stanley had absolutely no input on the plot. He would just bring in the pages.
Right.
So anyways, that's so the great John Romita has passed. He was a legend, a true master craftsman.
We shall not look upon his like again.
And so there is one more, I believe. Somebody had said that we had multiple.
No, I just wanted to make sure we did
Okay.
Romita.
I thought there was a second death that we needed to note. Because we had a lot.
Well,
Had a
yeah.
lot.
Well, we'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
Let's
So
move
if
on.
anybody else has died that we need to remember, consider yourself remembered.
Amen.
All right. So back to the Hapsburgs. I don't even know where to start ending.
Well, I'm waiting to see if Robert or Francis brings up the interesting one that falls within their realm.
Oh, this should be interesting.
Give me a little bit.
Neither one got a clue? The last Hapsburg?
Oh, yes.
Carl?
Yes, Emperor Karl Franz, who was actually, if you ever watch, and I remember this, and I bring this up often because it does hit so well, the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, they actually met Emperor Karl in one episode and kind of showed him because as he's meant to be a saint.
Okay, now I really didn't have anything to bring up Indiana Jones in any format with this.
I didn't think you did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's a.
I was thinking more John Paul II.
Well, that's correct because Emperor Karl, who was Austrian, of course, is up for sainthood. This is kind of amazing. The man who's leading by default, actually, because as we've talked about before, Franz Ferdinand was the heir.
Yes, he's the heir apparent after. I guess. Do you want me to do the whole backdrop?
Sure, go ahead. Well, we can do it quick.
So
I have confidence.
Franz Joseph is
The emperor.
The emperor for 60 plus years. His son Rudolph
Yeah.
is into kind of this murder-suicide thing with a 16-year-old girl.
Yes, we've covered that. Yes.
Yeah. So Crown Prince Rudolph is dead. So Franz Joseph has no immediate successor to hand off to. So he's going to hand it off to his younger brother.
Right.
Younger brother dies of dysentery in the 1890s. His son is Franz Ferdinand.
Right.
So Franz Ferdinand becomes the heir apparent. He does not want to marry into a royal line. He wants to marry a noble line, Sophie, but she's not royal.
Right.
Franz Joseph will not let this happen. He finally caves, gives in, but it's a morganatic marriage. The children of Franz Ferdinand cannot inherit
Right.
the Habsburg
Correct.
name.
Yeah. And ironically, Franz Ferdinand and Sophie was a love match. They are considered
Yes,
to be one
they
of
did.
the most
Yes.
successful of these royal marriages that of the time. They were
Yes.
considered to be very much in love and very good parents, very just the model that
Yes.
such things should be.
And it's a shame that their children could not inherit because at least it would have expanded the gene pool.
Yes.
As they weren't even thinking that way, even then.
And we don't want to go into World War I episodes because Robert will
No, because,
will
yes.
detail that. But we've discussed Franz Ferdinand and what a unique character he was. He's like, I want to liberalize, but to save the dynasty and make sure my power isn't diminished. It's weird. I want to.
Conflicting goals at the very least.
Yeah, I want to do this all differently and recognize all these ethnic minorities that make up the empire.
Yeah, because
but
at this
only
point,
so it
because it is a
guarantees
huge polyglot at this point. We haven't really talked about that.
Yeah.
Well, and in ways, that's very Habsburg of him
That's right. That's right.
because that was not uncommon.
survive.
How they survived. Yeah.
Yeah, they discovered, because we haven't really talked about the ethnic makeup of the empire at all these different points, but
Yeah.
because we've concentrated seemingly on the Germanic areas.
Right, because that's what held. I mean, obviously, there's still wars, lots of petty
Most
little
of them
crap going
spoke.
on, but
They spoke German, they spoke French, they spoke Czech, Italian.
yes, it was required at the age
Latin.
of 7 that they begin learning other languages.
And at this point, the Hungarians have been brought in, and that's a whole other aspect of
Right.
all this
Well,
stuff.
they had already been there, but by this point, they were actually a separate kingdom.
Correct.
And the
Franz Ferdinand
Simply
hated
held both
the
crowns.
Hungarians.
Yes.
So anyway, then of course when he's assassinated in 1914 by Gavrilo Princip, that touches off World War One,
that's-
and Karl becomes the heir apparent. He's another grandnephew. 1916, Franz Joseph dies, and it gets handed off to Karl.
And this is, of course, in the middle of the war, but Karl
And they're
himself,
getting their asses handed to them.
hence that episode, which actually is a reflection of what happened at the time, because Karl did try to make some clandestine. George Lucas, of course, inserts Indiana Jones into it, but
Yes, he made clandestine approaches to the French.
to the
and
French saying,
British.
"Come on,
Actually, a
let's-"
couple times.
Correct. That
More than once.
We
Yes.
we want to go ahead and seek a separate peace, which the episode lays out why this would change everything. Germany would lose its major ally, and then the war ends, which of course is the exact opposite of the way the French believed it. It says, at this point, too many men have died. F you. We're going for the jugular, and that's essentially what happened.
Well,
It's Karl himself.
I don't know about that. I think it was more France and England didn't want to lose any territories and they wanted to gain more when it came down to it.
Well, that's right. Defeat
And the
gives you
good-
everything.
Yeah, well, the Italians were the ones who stood to gain the most from Austria losing.
Correct.
So they
Yes.
weren't going to let Austria off the hook. Germany was not going to let Austria off the hook either, because when Wilhelm got wind of this, he's like, well, I'll just invade and I'll absorb Austria in.
And that's kind of the way that the episode ended when they talked about, well, why didn't, if you're spending all this time about something that's supposed to end everything, why didn't it? And it's usually just a few lines that Lucas put in there, but it's what he explained was, well, the Kaiser said, F you too. So essentially, and ironically, and this goes back to the sainthood issue with regards to Karl, he was trying to do the right thing by his people. And the world had already lost its marbles,
Well, that's
and there was no going back.
why it became termed that Germany was shackled to a corpse.
Yeah.
Its allies were more of a drag on it than a help.
Well,
This
yeah,
road
had
to
to
get to
bail
Karl was
them
longer
all
than
out.
getting to sainthood.
well, yeah, that's one of
I
the
said
reasons.
this road getting to Karl was longer than trying to get to sainthood.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
that's right, because there was still a lot of prejudice in Europe against him, because he presided over the demise of during World War One.
Well, that goes back to another thing, that he's already had 2 miracles prescribed to him as of 2008. And he was the first person to order the use of chemical weapons in World War I, chlorine gas or mustard gas, basically.
That is
So that
correct.
is kind of a contradictory thing going on. I found fascinating. Not to say he couldn't be forgiven for his choices during wartime and so forth, but I just found that immensely interesting.
And you know, how much influence did he truly have with that? There's been questions about that, of course.
How much influence did his family have with the Holy Roman Empire, too?
Well, which
It could
leads
go
us-
either way.
Yeah, that's right. Which kind of loops us back to where we want to kind of, I guess, find our way onto the landing.
So yeah, we're at an hour 15 here almost, so we probably should start.
Well, I
looking
knew
at
we'd go
summing
along with
things.
this one.
Well,
because
yes,
it's the bloody Holy
it's the
Roman Empire.
Hapsburgs, yes.
Right.
Hundreds and hundreds of
Hundreds
years.
of years, and we only scratched the surface. There's no way to truly do justice to the subject, but
Yeah, we could do a series on just the Habsburgs.
easily. But to me, one of the main reasons I wanted to do this was because of the impact. The world is as it is, not directly because, well, they did this because, so we'll automatically end up with this, but we have inherited the world that they built. I think is probably a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And
I mean, Central Europe sees itself as this united polity because of them.
yes, well, Central as in Germany. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of, especially now that Germany is not seen as the big bad guy anymore. There are a lot of commonalities because these people have intermarried and interbred in a good way, not a Hapsburg kind of way, for centuries. And so, everybody's got relatives everywhere else in Central Europe. And
So they see themselves as less those ethnicities and more as Europeans
I don't know.
because of the nature of Habsburg rule.
I don't know if they see themselves less as the particular ethnicities, especially when you get into Austria and Serbia and with the former Yugoslavia, because obviously there the ethnicities come first.
Right.
But it is. I think if there's any desire for a European unity as a single polity, I think it is a leftover, even if it's subconscious, of the Habsburg legacy.
Well, that's very good. I like that. I mean, they recognize, as a unit, we had advantages that we don't enjoy today.
Right.
That why can't we replicate that? Because we've proven for 1,000 years, mind you, it worked well.
Well,
So-
it worked
so-
well, but it's I mean, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that yes, there were still petty wars. Individual principalities would
Right.
go to war against the others, but as long as it was kept local, I think the Habsburgs were it's like, fine, whatever. Just take care of it quickly and don't bother me with it. Don't let it spread.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is the current European desire to see themselves as a united polity is derived from Habsburg hegemony.
Ooh, okay, yeah, go ahead and hit the button.
Word boner.
Yeah, I like that. That's
I think that you can definitely make an argument for that. And again, it might be a subconscious thing because obviously nobody alive today was alive during the Holy Roman Empire. That's 200 years ago. But Europeans have a longer sense of history than Americans
I would
do.
love to have some Europeans weigh in on this. I would love to talk to them and ask them.
That's
that.
interesting, 'cause
That would be a very
I
good
just don't
question.
know.
If you're sitting sitting in a cafe in Paris or in Berlin and having the conversation with somebody, that
Yeah,
would be
beer hall in Berlin, a cafe in,
But yeah, that's
in
true.
France.
To be able-
Budapest or
That's right. Be able to have it.
Sofia.
What do you think
places.
about this? And see what they would say because I
See
think
yourself as
The
a
Habsburg
Hungarian.
rule lasted 3 times longer than what we've been here in America. I mean,
That's correct.
Basically,
Very much
just
so.
roughly
Yeah, well, no, not really. I mean,
4 times.
4 times probably better. Yeah, because
Yeah.
250 years, 1,000 years.
well, that's the Holy Roman Empire. The Habsburg didn't rule it the entire time.
No, they had about 600 years or so, didn't they?
1440 to 1806.
Counting
direct-
Spain too.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about
Yeah,
the
we
Holy
didn't
Roman
even
Empire.
talk about
We didn't even talk
spinning
about
off
Habsburg
in the-
Spain.
Well, yeah, I think that probably deserves another episode where we do the War of Spanish Succession and talk about the 30 Years War because we've not done one on that.
I mean, we barely scratched.
Yeah, we've
Maria
talked about the
Teresa
30 Years
and
War.
we have, but
But
Maximilian
not-
of Mexico and all this other.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that was a real cluster.
At one time,
don't say that. I'm the only one that's ever dropped the F-bomb.
No, somebody else did.
I did.
Well, I did.
Oh, you did?
No, you did not.
I thought I did.
No, I did.
Not yet, but come on, we know it'll happen at some point from me.
Yeah, I know.
No, I used it very specifically and pointedly, talking about
did not edit
World
it
War
out.
II
Yeah.
and the Holocaust,
Yes.
because I couldn't think there was no other way to describe that event
Yes,
than to
and-
use the F
And
bomb.
Martin and I, in our great magnanimous mercy, allowed
And again, I just asserted my authority and did
Here he
it.
goes again.
All right.
You think that because you're captain, your shit don't think.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. So,
Wrap us
anyways,
up, Captain.
to me, again, that's why I think everybody should know the history of the Hapsburgs, because their legacy is far greater, I think, than anybody realizes in Europe.
It's an interesting insight, man.
Anybody else want to have any last thoughts on the Hapsburgs?
Nope.
I think you got it.
Do it.
Just an ugly people.
Yes, they did. Well, if you look at the current
Homely.
Hapsburgs, they aren't so bad.
Well, they stopped interbreeding.
They've
Yeah.
stopped interbreeding. Yeah,
What, 8,
they're
7,
still
8?
rotund little German men, basically, but they don't have that jaw that's out to
That's
a
the
foot away from
disadvantage of
his.
having. Perhaps, and Robert, I'll just throw this out there. Perhaps you should do a blog post
Oh,
on
yes.
that with a few pictures.
Yes, that would
because
probably
we
be a good
can't
idea.
really.
Yeah, I mean, again, Cajun.
The handsome. Stuff.
Yeah. Here's the bar where they've said
Yeah.
this is the high bar.
That's right. And you look at
Yeah.
the picture like, oh boy. And these guys are editing is like the painters are not being
Yeah.
quite exact
Right,
with the way they're
right.
doing this. So
So, anyways,
I
that's
believe the term would be woof woof woof.
Yes.
To
Well,
use
yes.
to use from my other dog imitation from Kelly's Heroes, right?
That's
Yes.
my other dog imitation. Go for it.
So,
Ryan.
anyways, listeners, as we always tell you, you should always do some reading of your own on the subjects we cover, because we can't cover them in depth, but we owe a great deal to the Habsburgs in one way or another, in my opinion, for the civilization that we have.
Amen to that.
All right, so Francis, buddy, what's
Well,
next?
code of honor, of course. And this next one is a freewheeler. We haven't decided that if we're going to have a theme to it. Sometimes that happens, in between.
Yeah, I think there's no theme to this one.
There's not one scheduled, but I was telling Cajun when he was asking us, is there a theme to this one? I said, well, we are notorious for saying no, and then as we're setting up for the episode, thinking, well, maybe we should. So,
Well, it's no official theme.
that's,
in
yeah,
the
that's
sense
right.
that
We don't have one at the point, but you guys know sometimes the freewheelingest is the best. Now, this is the first one we're going to do with 5 guys, so we're going to have.
This is going to be interesting for the
I'm
panel.
looking at Robert, I'm looking at Martin, and if I had a mirror, I'd look at myself saying, we've got to make sure we get this done on time and let 5 folks talk. So
Yes,
see how well next
I don't know why he's looking at me. Going last, mine is always the shortest because I've got to squeeze mine in.
Okay, I'll look at Martin because
That's fine.
both of us,
And-
he
yes,
and
the
I,
two of you.
yes,
Yes.
he and I have a tendency. We're
I
just going
usually
to
get right to mine, and you have the big setup.
He's got like
Here we
5
go.
minutes of setup, so
Okay,
yeah.
come on, fine. So you're going to put it all back on me.
Not all, but a good deal.
Okay, 90%.
Are you saying he walks behind the wagon to hook the horse to the front sometimes?
This is very okay.
It's a very vivid image. I'm not sure that
Loads of bovine excrement, shall we say, or,
Yes.
or equine
I
excrement.
could say that would be equine, not
right.
bovine. I'm a specialist in the bovine
That
area.
is correct. I bow to your bovine experience, sir. Nevertheless, next episode, tune in and see how the heck we pull this off.
we hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes drop every second and fourth Friday at 6 a.m. Eastern, just in time for your morning commute. And every fifth Friday, we drop a special Hoopajube episode. Spread the word we are on all the major platforms, and leave us a review. That helps others find us. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com. Join us next time, same snake time, same otter channel.